The rain over Earth 479's broken Gotham had a way of drowning memory. It came down in hard metallic sheets that rattled across the ribs of half-collapsed towers and steamed off the drowned streets like breath from a dying thing. Weeks had passed since the siege, since Morlun's body boiled away in a crater of black water and lightning. And still the city smelled like scorched copper in the Mobius Chamber's shadowed heart, anchored in the gray void just outside of time. The survivors worked without speaking. Prime Bruce at the console, shoulders tight and still, animated Batman's suit folded into a memorial niche. Terry running diagnostics in a limp, wingless beyond suit. The ghostly outline of the multiversal map hovering above them, its red burn marks refusing to fade. No alarms, no breaches, no movement from anything but their own grief, until the void itself shivered like a drumhead struck by an invisible hand. It began as a pressure in Bruce's ears more than a sound, a pressure that made the hair along his arms rise beneath Kevlar. The Mobius walls, all black geometry and sleeping circuitry, threw a slow ripple down their length. Barry looked up from a lattice of Speed Force readouts with a frown, and then the air tore open. Not jagged and hot like Morlun's entries, but clean, a vertical seam that parted, as if two panes of glass had decided to stop touching. It revealed nothing at all for a heartbeat. Then something stepped through and made nothing look like a mercy. He was taller than Morlun had been, broader through the shoulders, wearing armor that looked carved from the bones of extinct gods. Lacquered plates, sinew joints, and a tattered cloak strung with small metal fetishes that chimed softly in a wind that didn't exist here. The mask was a horned funerary face of black enamel and etched silver, its cheekbones sharp as razors, its mouth a narrow seam. In his right hand he carried a staff spear taller than any man, the head of it shaped like a crescent fang and a hooked prong, the whole weapon humming at a frequency that made the chamber's ancient stones vibrate, where Morlun had moved like a connoisseur entering a gallery. This one walked like a magistrate into a sentencing. The voice that came from behind the mask was oddly calm, sonorous, and flat. It rang with ritual. Your weave is tangled. He tilted the spear, its tip writing a line of faint luminous script through the air. I will untie it. Prime Bruce didn't waste words. His hand cut once, a silent signal. The surviving Batmen shifted. Terry to high flank, Brave and the Bold to the far column. Desert Knight ghosting along the upper catwalk with a rifle older than the city below. Spectre Bat stepping forward in a slow drift as green fire rolled off his shoulders like fog. The newcomer's head turned slightly, taking them in as one might an arrangement of tools. Not spiders, he observed, with the faintest note of interest. And yet you persist. Predators outside the web. The spear's half flexed. The Mobius floor thrummed underfoot. Karn, Barry's whisper made the name a curse. Superior Spider-Man's files. Edge of Snyderverse. Inheritor. Hunter, Karn said, as if correcting a child's grammar. My brother fed upon what was permitted. He pursued taste. I pursue order. The spear's head lowered. The bat totem proliferates without sanction. It corrupts fear into symbol, symbol into contagion. It must end. There wasn't time to move the dead words aside before he moved. Karn's first step covered half the chamber. His second carried him to the base of the dais. His third turned into a pivot that sent the spear's hooked prongs snapping towards Spectre Bat's chest. The spirit of vengeance swept a palm across the air, and a wall of emerald judgment rose. The spear punctured it, with a sound like ice screaming. Spectre Bat staggered, bleeding green light, and Bruce snapped a pair of microcharges onto the chamber floor. They blew in a staggered pattern that kicked Karn's heel, just enough for Terry to drop hard from the gantry, both gauntlets firing. Impact waves stuttered across Karn's cuirass. He gave ground by inches, not feet, the spearhead flicking up to catch Terry's second volley and split it into shards that ricocheted in harmless arcs. The weapon sang as it moved. It was not merely cutting air, it was tasting it. "Barry," Bruce said, not looking away. "Emergency tether on the chamber. If this goes bad, you yank us out." "Already humming," Barry said. And Bruce heard the fear under the joke, a tremor, small, held still by will. The multiversal map above them ticked once, as if in agreement. Karn's mask pivoted toward it. For an awful second, Bruce thought he could see curiosity in black enamel. Karn didn't press. He turned and walked back into the seam, the spear point trailing a tiny arc of luminous code in the air like a signature. The breach sealed. The chamber exhaled. The sound of their breathing came back in layers. He was mapping, Bruce said, because saying it first hurt less than hearing it. The spear or the mask, both are sensors. He wanted a baseline of this room's resonance. "Who the hell announces himself and leaves?" Terry asked, ripping a damaged stabilizer off his shoulder. Morlun at least had the decency to swing first. "He did swing," Spectre Bat said, voice a cold bell. His chest smoked, the hole in his incorporeal vestments, knitting slowly closed. "We weren't the target." The target revealed itself less than an hour later, on a world where the rain had teeth and the streets were long, narrow canyons of brick. The feed came in on a secondary channel, a contingency line Bruce had left open in case Flashpoint Thomas resurfaced on another Earth. It bloomed into the chamber as a shuddering view from a rooftop body cam. A narrow street in old Gotham, gas lamps flaring through mist, gunfire strobed into white scars. Thomas Wayne moved like rage, wearing a coat, red-trimmed cowl slick with rain, pistols speaking in cut. Controlled bursts as he backed across slate tiles. He never glanced at the camera. He didn't have time. Karn dropped into the frame, not like a man landing, but like a verdict rendered. The spear's heel struck slate, and ash spilled across the roofline in a halo of interference. Thomas fired point blank into the mask. The rounds flattened, sizzling, spitting, and Karn stepped through the smoke unmarked. The first exchange was a blur, steel, bone, rain, and then Thomas had a knife under Karn's chin, an old, ugly thing that had lived in too many ribs to be impressed now. He drove it up with a snarl. The blade bent, as if remembering it had been asked to be a sword once and failed. Karn caught Thomas's wrist, turned, and used the older man's own momentum to lay him across the ridge of the roof. The spear struck once, the prong punching clean through red leather and sternum, pinning the Flashpoint Batman like a crucifixion in miniature. Thomas tried to say a name. The rain took it from his mouth. Karn's free hand settled over Thomas's chest, and the draining began, not light, not blood, but a dimming, a collapsing of definition, as if the man were turning into a sketch someone kept erasing. When Karn withdrew the spear, what remained of Thomas Wayne slid down the tiles and left a shadow behind that didn't belong to any living thing. Bruce killed the feed because there was nothing left to see. The second kill came wrapped in a laugh track that wasn't funny. Arkham City's skyline slashed up in razor angles and cranes, rain falling like broken glass. Batman had already broken Joker's last play, and left the clown slumped against a cooling unit in a smear of purple and red. The roof offered a moment too long to breathe. Karn took it from him. The spear came in from the blind corner without flourish, a butcher's stroke. Arkham Batman turned into it late, his armored forearm catching the hook and skidding, the other gauntlet punching for the neck seam. Karn accepted the blow, let it clang, then stepped inside, and drove the haft like a ram into Bruce's solar plexus. Air left him hard enough to kink his spine. A follow-up pivot put the spearhead across the cowl seam. The third motion lifted the armored body off its feet and set it down on the parapet edge, like a trophy being arranged. Karn's palm pressed to the chest plate. The Arkham suit's lights flickered, then dimmed, and the body slumped, heavy and empty. Joker, halfway to dead, croaked a giggle at nothing at all. Karn ignored him the way a hurricane ignores a wind chime. Red Sun Batman died in a snow that wanted to be ash. Stalin's Russia under a sky of iron. The Bat insignia, a clandestine brand, stamped in blood and stubbornness. He had no cape. Capes killed revolutionaries. And his mask was a hard wedge of leather that kept out cold, and comrades equally well. He led a handful of partisans through alleys of propaganda and concrete. Karn walked through walls to meet him, the spear wearing frost like a jewel. The Russian Bruce managed one perfect counter. A dropped shoulder, a sweep, a body-weight throw that slammed Karn against a mural of a red sun rising. And then Karn's backhand turned him sideways in time, and the spear erased him from history. The snow took what he'd been, and the red star above them did not flicker. In the chamber, the map updated. 3 new red embers. Barry stared at them like he could outrun their afterglow. Terry put a hand flat on the console, jaw clenched so hard a vein ticked along his temple. Brave and the Bold said nothing for once. Even his colors seemed dimmer. Spectre Bat's eyes were coals. He consumes to correct, the spirit said. He believes the web requires subtraction. He's not just feeding, Bruce said. He's indexing. Each kill updates the spear's coordinates, refines his model of the archetype. Morlun ate what he wanted. Karn is building something. An execution list, Terry muttered. A map, Bruce said. He turned from the deaths to the living, to the thin ring of shoulders that had not yet buckled. We build faster. He called up external bands and old favors, watched pale icons blink into being as signals cleared. Among them, one that held for exactly 3 seconds, then resolved with a laugh that didn't cut. It danced. The figure stepped into view on a screen like a panel that had slipped its gutters. A man in a suit that stitched Bat and Spider together in black and crimson. Webs engraving the cowl's cheekbones, ears knifing back along a hood, striped with tiny silk threads. He perched on the lip of a church spire, upside down, and waved without letting go. Nice home you've got there, Bats, the newcomer said, voice bright and warm over the cross-dimension lag. Creepy, very you, name's Spider-Bat, friendly neighborhood, complicated metaphor. I got your distress signal and the big guy with the spear just turned my skyline into a mood ring. He flipped down to land, the move a perfect median between a swing and a glide. You've got a hunter with a grudge against symbols. I'm a symbol with options. Let me in. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Vashina and Bruce felt the rarest thing in his chest, the smallest tilt toward relief. Because the man on the screen moved like a story that refused to choose one myth over another, and made both work anyway. We're not a neighborhood, Bruce said. We're a war room. Spider-Bat's head cocked. Good. I brought a war. He tapped the side of his cowl and sent a burst of data that unspooled across the chamber's air. Spectral graphs of the spear's hum, cross-sections of its prongs, harmonic signatures that matched 6 web frequencies and a pattern of void resonance Bruce recognized from the walls themselves. He's using that staff to tune to us. It's a fork. He strikes it. We ring. He announced himself to make sure we heard the note, Bruce said. And you're going to answer, Spider-Bat said, not as a question. He grinned without joy. Good. Because if Karn's rewriting the hunting rules, we're going to make a new rule of our own. He glanced past the feed, as if he could see the ghost beyond Bruce's shoulder. First we stop the bleed. Then we hunt the hunter. Bruce cut the feed only because the chamber didn't allow for applause. He stared at the place where the man had been, and saw motion instead of absence for the first time in days. We're not waiting here to be cataloged, he said to the room, to the map, to the part of himself that wanted to sit down. We form teams. We move now. We intercept. He tapped the multi-earth comms open, felt the weight of a dozen legends swivel toward him across the void. Shadow Watch is active. Somewhere that wasn't aware, Karn walked through a cathedral whose architecture was made of screams held in stone. The spear ticked once against the floor and showed him the chamber's pulse fading at a distance. He did not hurry. Order was patient because it did not require victory to be inevitable, only eventual. Through his mask, the web's faintest hum curled like smoke. The bad archetype's signal had grown, brightening as more of its echoes gathered together. That made the next sequence easier, not harder. He had culled the loudest shadow. Now he would file the rest. The spear's prongs summer scraped out a thin, descending chord. Universes listened. On a drowned rooftop, where the rain could not decide whether to fall or float, the Shadow Watch's first roster assembled. Prime Bruce, setting teeth into a plan, like a lockpick. Spider-Bat rolling his shoulders in a nervous coil that meant he was ready. Desert Knight checking his last magazine. Spectre-Bat lowering his burning hands over Terry's broken wing and welding it back together with judgment. The Mobius chamber dimmed to battle light. The map's red points glowed like cauterized wounds. Loss had made their ranks thin. Karn would make them thinner. The work ahead would not replace what had been erased. It would not end with cheers. It would end, Bruce swore, with a stop. He opened the channel to all bats and spoke with a voice that had put down riots and whispered children to sleep. A voice like stone learning to bend. Shadow Watch, move. The Mobius chamber bled into the void, like a shadow with a heartbeat, its surface alive with ripples of dark geometry, as Bruce keyed in the coordinates sun up by the Spider-Bat had sent. The spectral map above them pulsed in response, overlaying translucent threads. Not just worlds, but resonance points, the invisible chimes of the bad archetype when struck by the right kind of predator. Every red ember was a loss. Every flicker of yellow meant a living Batman somewhere out there, moving, breathing, waiting for a fate they didn't know was hunting them. Bruce's fingers moved over the console like they were breaking a lock from the inside. He didn't look up when the air above the central dais shimmered and Spider-Bat stepped through. The Mobius warp bleeding him into their reality like ink into water. He landed light, lighter than any man in armor had a right to, his boots hitting the metal with a soft scuff. The black and crimson suit seemed to pull the light toward it, spider webbing across the chest flowing into the bat symbol, like two predators learning to share a skeleton. Portal's clean, Spider-Bat said, pulling off one gauntlet to tap the holomap. I tracked Karn's staff harmonics from my side, and you're not gonna like where the trail leads. His fingers traced a curve across a cluster of coordinates, stopping at a world marker glowing faintly orange. He's headed here next. Earth, 1298. You've got a dark claw there. Guy's half you, half Logan. Spider-Bat's mouth tightened. Karn gets a hold of him. He'll pick up a healing factor on top of everything else. You do not want to fight that later. Bruce didn't nod. Didn't give anything that could be mistaken for agreement. Just opened the channel. Team Alpha, on me. Terry, already wearing a temporary stabilizer wing, dropped from the gantry. Gotham Samurai stepped forward from the shadows of the upper tier, armor plates whispering against each other. Clockwork Batman locked his helm with a hiss of steam. Spider-Bat fell in behind them like he'd been there forever. Barry's voice cut in from the side, hands blurred over a secondary board. I'll keep the chamber humming and feed you location pings. If he changes course, you'll know before he does. Don't miss, Bruce said. The warp folded them out into Earth, 1298's Gotham, which smelled like burnt leather and gun oil. Just in time to see a rooftop cut in half. Dark Claw was already there. Claws crossed to catch the spear's prongs. Sparks flew where adamantium met, whatever alien alloy the staff was forged from. Karn bore down, his bulk forcing Dark Claw to his knees. Logan's half bared its teeth. Bruce's half kept the guard up. You're not on my dance card, Dark Claw snarled. Karn's answer was a short, brutal twist of the spear that tore the claws out wide, leaving the chest open for the draining touch. Spider-Bat moved first, a whip of web across the staff haft, yanking Karn a half step offline. It was enough for Gotham Samurai to slip in from the side, blade low, aiming for the back of the knee. The cut rang but didn't sever. Karn pivoted, elbow smashing into Samurai's helm, hard enough to dent steel. Clockwork Batman brought an exo arm down like a pile driver. The impact sent Karn skidding backward across the gravel, staff braced to stop the slide. He didn't look winded. He looked calibrated. The mask tilted a degree, the hum of the staff rising as if taking a reading. Bruce dropped in between Karn and Dark Claw, batarangs fanning in a spread designed to force a block. Karn batted them aside in a ripple of motion, spearhead slicing one into molten halves. Dark Claw surged up, claws flashing too slow. Karn's hand slammed to his chest, and in the span of a single heartbeat, the hybrid totem's outline dimmed. His knees buckled, claws clattering to the roof. Karn let the body drop without ceremony. The mask turned toward Bruce. Alpha, disengage! Bruce snapped, hand closing on Gotham Samurai's shoulder to drag him back. Now. They vanished into the Mobius warp, a half second before the spear could tag their coordinates. Dark Claw's icon flared red on the chamber map. Spider-Bat paced the floor as soon as they were through. That's 2 steps ahead every move. He's reading us, Bats. Literally reading us. Every strike's faster, every counter tighter. He's learning the archetype in real time. Bruce ignored the obvious, that they'd lost another legend, and started reassigning. Team Beta, Brave and the Bold, Batman Drowned, Desert Night, Earth 2012. Team Gamma, Animated, Spectre Bat Beyond, Earth 230. Karn's not slowing down, neither are we. The chamber's walls rippled as 2 more portals spun open. Somewhere out there, a cathedral of screams waited for the next trophy. The Mobius chamber pulsed with departure after departure. Prime Bruce tracked each team's feed on 3 separate displays, the yellow icons flickering as they dropped into their assigned Earths. Beta's channel opened first. Brave and the Bold stepping out into a Gotham lit entirely by sodium arcs. Batman Drowned sloshing through ankle-deep rainwater with her trident held ready. Desert Night sweeping the rooftops with his scope. Clear, the wasteland Bruce reported, voice as dry as the sands he'd come from. But the air smells wrong. Gamma checked in from Earth 230's Neo Gotham, a spiderweb of maglev lines and holo ads flickering in the night. Animated Batman moved with the same economy of motion he always had, his cape cutting clean black arcs against the city's sickly blue glow. So far so good, he said. Though the flat tone suggested he didn't believe it, Spectre Bat floated behind him, eyes like emerald lighthouses in a smog bank. Terry's voice came from somewhere above the frame. If Karn shows here, I'll tag him before he's through the warp. But Karn wasn't in either city. He was already on Earth, 2012, a towering cyber metropolis, where the skyline looked like someone had frozen fireworks in mid-explosion. Team Alpha's portal cracked open above a glider dock, hot neon pooling across the rain-slick steel. Bruce, Spider-Bat, Gotham Samurai, and Clockwork Batman fanned out, scanning the tangles of sky bridges and hanging gardens below. Spider-Bat's eyes narrowed behind the mask. He's here. I can feel the hum, like a tuning fork inside my bones. They found the first sign in an empty marketplace, its stalls still steaming as if the vendors had just stepped away. The ground was etched with 3 concentric arcs, the unmistakable pattern of Karn's staff tip when planted. Bruce knelt, fingers ghosting over the scorched lines. He was standing here for a while, he murmured, not hunting, waiting. The air flexed behind them. Karn dropped into the market square without sound, the rain finding the planes of his armor and running off like quicksilver. He didn't lunge, he just began walking forward, the spear trailing lazy arcs that hissed where they touched the wet steel. Samurai stepped in to intercept, blade angled low. Karn spun the spear up in a single, tight whirl and caught the katana's edge between prong and hook. A twist, a pull. The sword rang out of Samurai's grip and skittered across the square. Clockwork Batman charged in, hydraulics screaming. Karn sidestepped, hooking the exoarm and using its own piston to whip Clockwork sideways into a hanging stall. Canvas split, fruit rolled. The big man didn't get up. Spider-Bat hit Karn from behind, webs fanning across the spear shaft to pin it to the ground. For half a breath, it held. Then Karn simply lifted the staff, dragging Spider-Bat off his feet in the same motion, and slamming him into the ground hard enough to crack the tiles. Now, Bruce barked, throwing a batarang cluster. 3 of the shuriken caught Karn's mask, flaring white. The others burst into concussive smoke. He used the cover to grab Samurai's shoulder and haul him toward the warp point. But Karn didn't pursue. He moved up. One bound took him to a sky bridge 30 feet overhead. He planted the spear, humming it once. The sound resonated up the bridge, into the suspension pylons. The steel groaned, then screamed, and a section of the bridge tore loose, dropping into the marketplace. The debris blocked the warp point. Spider-Bat's voice was tight. Bats, he's splitting us up. And that's exactly what Karn did. The next minutes were chaos. Samurai and Bruce forced toward the east gantries, Spider-Bat driven upward into the gardens, Clockwork unconscious and pinned under wreckage. Each time one of them tried to regroup, Karn was there to force them apart again, always pressing just hard enough to keep them on the run, never overcommitting. Bruce realized too late what it meant. This wasn't an ambush. It was observation. Every feint, every counter, every grapple line they fired was being cataloged in the staff's memory. When they finally forced a retreat through an emergency warp, only 3 of them made it back to the chamber. Clockwork's icon went red moments later. The silence after the portal closed was worse than the fight. Spider-Bat paced tight circles, muttering under his breath. Samurai cleaned his blade with deliberate slowness. Bruce just stared at the map, at the red points spreading like burns. Then the chamber's alarm rolled out like a bass note in a cathedral. A breach, not in any of the assigned Earths, but here. Karn's voice came through the comm grid, unbidden and unfiltered. It was low, almost conversational. Your refuge hums like a heart. I will still it soon. The line went dead. The Mobius chamber had never felt small before. It was infinite in theory, a construct sitting in the folds between realities, insulated by time-proof walls of impossible metal, and dimension seals woven by the kind of minds Bruce trusted only in retrospect. But as soon as Karn's voice bled through the comm grid, the air inside seemed to draw inward. The shadows felt heavier. Even the multiverse map's glow seemed dimmer, like the room itself understood what was coming. Bruce was already moving before the alarm had finished its second pulse. Positions, he said, voice sharp, no room for doubt. Samurai took the upper gantries, sword in one hand, smoke pellets in the other. Desert Knight slipped into the high corner opposite him with his rifle. Batman Drowned waded through a conjured tide that poured from nowhere, flooding the lower deck to waist height. Spectre Bat drifted near the portal controls, his burning hands tracing containment sigils in the air. Animated Batman checked the restraints on a containment loop projector. Spider-Bat hung from the ceiling webwork, body coiled and ready to spring. The chamber's wall to the left shimmered once, not the sudden violence of a forced breach. A slow parting, the way a predator might slip into a herd without causing panic. Karn stepped through, as if he'd always belonged in this space. The armor still shone in the Mobius light. The spear dripped with rain from Earth, 2012. The horned mask turned fractionally, taking in every stationed figure. It is unwise, he said, to place all prey in one pen. Containment loop, Bruce snapped. Animated Batman fired the projector, a vertical ring of green-white light that locked around Karn's chest and shoulders. The hum of it rattled the chamber floor, throwing light shadows across every face. For 2 full seconds, Karn stood still inside it, the staff held low. Then he raised the weapon in both hands and simply pushed. The loop's field buckled in on itself with a noise like a dying star, shards of photonic light falling away like broken glass. Batman Drowned surged forward, the tide beneath her swelling to lift her shoulder to shoulder with Karn. She drove the trident toward the gaps in his armor. Karn pivoted with unnatural speed, catching the shaft of her weapon between the staff prongs and twisting. The motion dragged her off balance, head plunging underwater. He pressed the flat of his palm to the back of her helmet, pinning her to the floor. She thrashed, bubbles spilling in frantic bursts, before the green glow in her eyes faded and her body went limp. He let her drift into the tide as if she weighed nothing. Samurai dropped from above, blade a silver blur, striking at the seam in Karn's helm. The steel connected, a clean, ringing blow. And for the first time, the mask cracked, a thin line running from temple to jaw. Karn responded by stepping into Samurai's guard and ramming the butt of the staff into his chest, hard enough to dent armor. Samurai folded, hitting the water with a cough of blood. Now, Spider-Bat yelled, firing twin web lines at Karn's spear hand and yanking him toward the rafters. The sudden lift pulled Karn off his footing. Spectre-Bat's cue to move. He descended in a rush of emerald fire, slamming both burning palms into Karn's exposed mask crack. The room flared green. Karn's head snapped to the side, the mask hissing as the fire bit at its seams. But instead of recoiling, Karn stepped into it, his free hand locking around Spectre-Bat's throat. The spirit choked, flames sputtering, as Karn drove the staff upward and smashed him against the chamber's wall. The impact rattled the entire structure. Desert Knight opened fire from above. A tight burst to Karn's shoulder seam. The first 2 rounds sparked off. The third lodged, making him stagger. Bruce was on him in that half second, grappling in, hands locking around the staff. He drove his gauntlet's edge into the crack in the mask once, twice. The third blow broke away a sliver of black enamel, revealing scar tissue twisted like rope beneath. Karn wrenched the staff free with a surge of strength, planting it against Bruce's chest plate and shoving him back across the deck. "Your fight is orderly," Karn said, the calm tone making it worse. "It will be preserved in my memory." That was when animated Batman lunged in from behind, arms locking around Karn's torso, projector still strapped to his back. "Get clear," he shouted. Bruce didn't argue. He pulled Samurai's arm over his shoulder and retreated toward the high gantry. Spider-Bat swung out to grab Desert Knight, and haul him up toward the portal controls. The loop fired again. Animated Batman's grip held it in place, even as Karn thrashed, the field slicing white scars into his armor. "You're not leaving here," he began, and then Karn slammed his helm back into animated Batman's face. The loop destabilized. Karn drove the staff down through the projector, splitting it in half, and with a twist sent animated Batman skidding across the floor, unconscious. A moment later, the chamber's main breach alert screamed. The map above them glitched, coordinates spilling into a lattice across Karn's staff. He'd been scanning the Mobius link the entire fight. Bruce felt the truth settle like lead. Karn now had partial coordinates to every Batman left alive. Karn stepped backward into the breach, staff humming in satisfaction. The horned mask angled toward Bruce in a slow acknowledgement. "Soon," he said, and vanished. Earthnull was a wound in the multiverse. The Mobius Chamber's warp spit the survivors into a city, stitched together from dead realities, each block stolen from some other Gotham, and grafted at the seams like a mad surgeon's project. Clock towers from Victorian rooftops leaned against monorail pylons from Neo-Gotham. Flooded streets cut through red sun boulevards, lined with cracked Soviet statues. Billboards in half a dozen languages flickered and bled into one another. Above it all, the sky churned, not with clouds, but with the thin, translucent film of reality fraying at its edges. Every time the wind shifted, you could hear it groan. Spider-Bat landed beside Bruce, scanning the jagged skyline. He chose this place for a reason. Dead worlds bleed easy, gives him power. "Gives us a tomb," Desert Knight muttered, racking a fresh magazine into his rifle. Samurai stood silent, knuckles white on his hilt. Spectre-Bat floated in their wake, his green flame dimmer than before, but still burning. They had all been marked by the siege in the chamber. Batman drowned and animated Batman were gone. Bruce could still see them on the map if he closed his eyes. Red embers in the dark. The sound came first, not the hum of Karn's staff this time, but the heavy rhythm of armor on stone. He stepped into view at the far end of a street that was both an alley and a bridge, depending on which half you looked at. The spear was slung across his back for once, and he was holding something in one hand, a shard of the Mobius Chamber's wall, glowing faintly with stored coordinates. He planted it into the cracked pavement, like a banner. "This is the end of the hunt," Karn said. "The archive is complete. The last page will be written here." Spider-Bat didn't wait for a cue. He launched forward, webs snaring the Mobius shard and yanking it toward himself. Karn let it go, swinging the staff up in the same motion to intercept Desert Knight's rifle burst. The rounds pinged off, but one lodged deep near the elbow joint. Samurai closed the gap in the next breath, blade singing for Karn's throat. The Inheritor tilted his head just enough for the steel to glance, then stepped into the cut, and drove his knee into Samurai's ribs. The crack echoed through the alley bridge. Bruce was already behind Karn, using the distraction to drive twin shock gauntlets into the cracked seam in his mask. Electricity spat across the armor. Karn snarled, not in pain, but annoyance, and spun, backhanding Bruce into a crumbling archway. Stone rained down. He rolled aside just as the spear punched through where his chest had been. Spectre Bat descended then, engulfing Karn in a cyclone of green fire. The light reflected off every wet surface, making the warped street look like it was burning alive. Karn staggered a step, armor blackening, before stabbing the spear straight into the heart of the flame. The impact shattered the ghost light, scattering it into the sky like fireflies fleeing a predator. Spectre Bat reeled, chest plate smoking, as Karn's palm struck his sternum and sent him tumbling into the ruins of an old GCPD facade. Spider-Bat hit next, swinging from a crooked monorail track, slamming both feet into Karn's back. The blow drove him to one knee. Bruce was there instantly, grappling in from the opposite side, pulling a sliver of unstable web energy from his belt. "Move," he barked, and Spider-Bat rolled clear. Bruce jammed the shard into the spear's prong joint and twisted. The reaction was instant. The weapon screamed. Not a hum, but a living howl. As the shard's chaotic frequency tore through its harmonics, fractures raced down the haft. The head of the spear exploded in a flash of black and white light, shards flying into the warped skyline. Karn staggered, clutching the ruined staff, his mask finally splintering apart to reveal the ruined face beneath. All scar tissue in a single cold, milky eye. "You've unstrung the bow," he said, voice still calm, despite the blood now darkening the corners of his mouth. "But the arrow has already flown." Bruce didn't answer with words. He tackled Karn backward, driving him into the cracked pavement. They rolled, trading blows, gauntlet strikes shattering armor plates, Karn's fists landing with the weight of falling masonry. Desert Knight joined in, jamming the barrel of his rifle into a gap in Karn's side, and firing until the mag clicked dry. Samurai's blade found the same wound and dug deep, twisting. Karn roared, the first real roar they'd heard from him, and surged up, throwing all three of them off. Bruce hit the side of a leaning skyscraper hard enough to crack the facade. Karn stumbled after him, spearless now, pulling a jagged length of rebar from the rubble to use as a weapon. Spider-Bat swung in low, wrapping Karn's legs in webbing. The Inheritor kicked free of one strand, but it gave Bruce the opening he needed. He drove forward, shoulder into Karn's midsection, and carried him into a collapsing corner of the street. The ground gave way beneath them, plunging both into the hollow beneath, a place where half a dozen stolen Gothams had been welded together in the dark. They landed hard. Karn was first to his feet, rebar swinging. Bruce caught it on his gauntlets, twisted, and drove an uppercut into Karn's jaw. Bone met metal, both gave. The Inheritor stumbled back into a fault line of unstable web energy, bleeding through the walls. The strands wrapped around him instantly, hissing, burning into armor and flesh alike. He tried to pull free, but Bruce was already on him, grappling arms locking around the ruined mask. "This ends," Bruce growled, and shoved Karn deeper into the rift. The web strands closed like a fist, dragging Karn into their light. His voice didn't rise. It simply faded, repeating a single word until it was gone. "Order, order." Then the rift sealed, leaving only silence and the faint smell of scorched iron. Bruce climbed back to the surface where Spider-Bat and the others waited, battered but standing. The mobius shard lay in the rubble nearby, its light guttering out. They returned to the chamber hours later. The map updated. No more red spreading, but no green, replacing what was lost. Entire worlds still lay empty. Their Batmen gone forever. Bruce stood before it for a long time, helmet under his arm, the others quiet behind him. Finally, he said, "We won. But those worlds, they'll face the night without their dark knights." No one argued. The Mobius chamber was quieter than Bruce had ever heard it. Even the constant low hum of the stabilizers seemed muted, as if the structure itself was holding its breath. The map above the central dais still glowed, but the spread of colors had changed. No more creeping red as Karn's hunt claimed another life, but no new yellow flares of survival either. The worlds marked with the gray pall of loss stayed that way, a permanent absence in the weave. Spider-Bat stood beside Bruce, his mask retracted, showing tired eyes and a mouth pulled into a tight line. "I've got my own city to get back to," he said, glancing once more at the flickering lines of the map. "But you ever call, I'll come. Doesn't matter the distance." "You'll need it," Bruce replied, without turning his gaze away from the map. "Your city will keep pulling you forward. Don't look back at what we couldn't change." Spider-Bat gave a short, humorless laugh. "That's rich coming from you." But he didn't push it. A moment later, his warp opened, and he swung into the light. The portal closed with a whisper, and his icon winked out from the chamber's status list. One by one, the others departed. Desert Knight's departure left behind only the faint scent of sand and gunpowder. Gotham Samurai bowed without a word before stepping into the warp to his own timeline, katana resting against his shoulder. Spectre Bat dissolved into green embers that slipped into the cracks of reality, gone without ceremony. Bruce was the last. He stood before the map for a long moment, hands on the console, memorizing the shapes of the universes they'd saved, and the ones they'd lost. His gauntlet hovered over the shutdown control. The chamber could stay on, keep scanning, but every pulse of it was a reminder of the silence in those dead worlds. Finally, he pressed the switch. The lights dimmed. The map's glow receded until only the center orb remained, pulsing once, twice, and then winking out completely. The chamber became nothing more than a shell of cold metal and dark corridors, a refuge with no more war to fight, at least for now. Bruce stepped into his warp gate, the familiar skyline of his Gotham visible through the shimmer. Rain was falling there, as it always seemed to. He glanced back once at the empty chamber. In the absence of the map's light, his reflection in the dark metal looked older, heavier, like one more shadow among many. He turned away and stepped through. The portal ceiling shut behind him. In the void between worlds, where the chamber had once hummed with life, there was nothing. Only the silence of those who would never return.